Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone is doing fine. My name is Paxton Maina, a conservation education officer in Mount Kenya Trust, which is a non-profit organization based in protecting and conserving the Mount Kenya ecosystem. Mainly of what I do is mostly engaging with students. That means these are students aged from as low as 5 years old all the way to 18 and sometimes college students. So I think that's basically mainly what I'm handling at the moment. And beyond that and beyond organizational capacity work is a lot of volunteer work, a lot of reaching out to communities, and more of trying to find a solution and innovative solutions to climate and environmental challenges. So just a brief introduction, I'm going to be covering a bit of conservation education and awareness and sensitization at the same time. So a brief introduction of Mount Kenya Trust, as I had said earlier, is a non-profit organization which is dedicated to safeguarding the Mount Kenya ecosystem, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Ranging from our projects, conservation education, we have community-based projects which mostly involve restoration efforts, tree nursery management. We have rangers on the ground who help in also advocacy and education to the communities as well. We have some projects like the community health project, which aims to giving back to the community as well as addressing reproductive health and rights. So our mission is mainly that. I think I've highlighted that into the introduction. So I'm just going to go straight into education and awareness. I think, as we all know, education and awareness falls as a basis of our lives, as well as a base of any project implementation. This mainly means that any activity that you're doing to engage with the community or the schools require a bit of sensitization, a bit of education, and a bit of awareness with the project and the people on the ground. So I think what we've been doing, we have two main areas we covered during the conservation education. One of them is community-based initiatives. This mainly means that you get into the communities, go into the communities. These are mainly communities within the Mount Kenya boundary and Mount Kenya ecosystem. We have talks, we have screens, we have screening, we have showing of videos and everything, anything to get the community talking about conservation and the challenges they are facing at ground level. The other initiatives are the school-based initiatives. So the main ones we've been handling is the woodlots or tree nursery establishment in schools, which is a way of fostering responsibility and adopting a tree and ecoclimates within schools. And it also aims to reduce the amount of pressure the forest gets. That means that the schools can use some of these trees for their own projects within the school. We have water harvesting initiatives. I think the greatest challenges that we are facing at the moment, I think we are blaming it on climate change, but I think we are also to blame for some of the challenges we are facing because we have as many as schools located within the Mount Kenya ecosystem, the Mount Kenya boundaries that are facing high challenges of lack of water. So what we've been doing is providing incentives, equipment to the schools. I try and educate the schools why water harvesting is important and how they can use the water harvested into their own school-based activities. The other invention is through events. We have the World Environmental Day. We have cleanups, among other events, which are a great way of reaching out to the youth. I think among these events, the greatest turnout is usually the young people, the young adults, the youth, and the children, which mainly shows a great drive for change. The other activity is mainly talks and discussions, which are mainly outdoor activities, getting students to open up to the challenges they're facing or the conversation on conservation, the challenges within climate change and everything and beyond. And finally, I'm going to dive into the Junior Ranger Program, which is one of my pilot initiatives within the organization. So what it mainly does and what getting into a class means igniting curiosity and creativity. This means a student has had a whole day of, let me say, maybe speeches from the teachers, a lot of activities on the screen, a lot of textbook activity. So at the end of the day, when they see a new face, they expect new ideas. They expect, of course, new activities on the table and everything. So among them is, how do you engage students, or how do you create that sense of creativity within them and indulge them in the different topics that they are willing to cover? One of them is interactive learning, and we have project-based learning. I think I'll touch on these briefly in a few. We have hands-on activities, which are a main and a greatest way of helping students understand some of the activities they're facing. If example, I have a young girl here who was called Wanjiro and Steve from one of the schools within the underserved community. This is a game they are playing on climate change, and it mainly touches on the positivities and the negativities of climate change, but it's all presented into a board game. This mainly gives them a chance to interact, explore, and of course, learn in a very fun way. The other activity will be mainly practical skills. This mainly means, example, the program has, of course, several modules. Example of it will be tree planting or woodlots activities in schools. These, after most of the theory work in class, students are expected to come up with projects within the different modules. Example, they could come up with a tree nursery, a recycling of materials from waste packets, sourcing some seeds from the, of course, overgrown trees. These are some of the hands-on practical skills within some of the schools I'm working with. Then a great other instrument will be exposure trips and field-based activities. Sometimes you get into a class, most of the students have, of course, never been beyond several kilometers of their community or more further away from their ecosystem and ways of comfort living. So a greatest way to ensure that students or young adults are learning is, after what I teach in class, how do the students get to interact, or how do they get to visualize with some of the activities you're teaching in class? Some of the best ways are to take them on field activities or let them engage with the experts in the different fields. Some of the photos here, the first one, we have our ranger trying to demonstrate snaring of wildlife within the elephant corridor. We have an image of some students on a game drive somewhere in Lewa Conservancy. And we have a Kenya Wildlife Service ranger who's taking students through one of the areas within the Mount Kenya ecosystem. This mainly gives them a sense of responsibility, a sense of attachment to whatever they are learning, a sense of exposure to whatever they are learning from class into the field, as well as it creates a sense of interactiveness within the students. As I think I had mentioned earlier, we have several ways of course, engaging with the students, considering that we are engaging with students, several ages, different age groups, different environments within the Mount Kenya ecosystems, which face different challenges all collectively. We have other interventions like storytelling. Mainly through storytelling, what this does is mainly gives the students a chance to really open up. I think I once went to one class and you asked them what is the main challenge that is brought about by forest fires. And a student raises a hand and says, the parent did tell them during very dry seasons, lighting fire makes the smoke go up, which turns into clouds, which then brings rain. Of course, we have a lot of myths and misconceptions within conservation as well. But it is a way of trying. I think sometimes, I think I'm going to agree that change is gradual, change is very painful, and it has to be patient as well. So when engaging with students, it's usually a very slow process in trying to help them understand that, okay, whatever your parents said isn't wrong, but we have another different aspect or another different view of things from another perspective. And this then could lead into something you try to help them understand the impacts of both sides. The other most mainly working activity is films and documentaries. Sometimes we have a lot of schools which or who may not afford to take their students into a conservation area or maybe take them to exposure trips. So the main way to help them will be through maybe virtual realities. We have films and documentaries to try and create a near realistic experience for the students as well. Now I'll dive a bit into digital literacy, which is more of curriculum development and digital integration within the classroom and outside the classroom. So initially, I helped pilot some of the schools' implementation for the Junior Rangers program. Those were around 12 schools within the Mount Kenya boundary. I think the only main advantage with a long processed developed curriculum is students don't get to see you as a one-time visitor. They get to see you as part of the team. With the time, they get to open up of the challenges and everything that is happening within the ecosystem. They get to identify those hotspots which are mainly facing challenges like human-wildlife conflicts. And the most important thing about integrating conservation, ICT, digital literacy, and technology is the students get to create their own projects. They get to get exposure to technology. They get to understand the process of creating their own projects, which is mainly done either online or offline as well as on the ground level. This creates a whole new intervention of students understanding the process of their projects and they're willing to create. The other major advantage is impacts, monitoring. I think through digital literacy, we can be mainly, we are able to monitor what student is doing what projects they are doing, what content is more understood by the students, which sections mainly need intervention. The main reason for implementation of these was to cover almost three sides of a dice. The main advantage of it is getting to support the public schools, which lack main resources for digital integration, as well as support the schools with the school-based curriculum, which is mainly also environmentally based. So I think from that, the rest of it will be covered more with the discussions and everything around it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Paxton. Thank you for taking us through the work that you're doing and tackling environmental innovation from the scale of young learners within the organization that you work for. I'd like to move now on to Samir. Samir, can you take us through some of the work you've been doing? And feel free to share your screen.
But yeah, thank you very much for having me. My name is Samir Randera-Rees. I manage the WWF Nedbank Green Trust, which is a special purpose funding vehicle that was established 35 years ago. It is funded by Nedbank, which is one of South Africa's biggest banks, and I think Africa's biggest bank, one of Africa's biggest banks. And it's administered by WWF. I'm employed by WWF. And the Green Trust, the way that we position ourselves is that we try to fund conservation projects across South Africa that are innovative and catalytic. So innovative in that they are trying to do something new, something interesting, trying to solve problems in a different way. And catalytic, meaning that we aim for these projects to be a seed that can grow into a tree, that what comes out of this project can grow into something more that can continue to have impact long after our contract and our funding has ended. So that's how we try to do things. And I was asked this question, what does conservation innovation look like? And what role can youth play in that? So let me just pull up my slides. So I'll take you through, we have an open call for applications. twice a year, and we get a whole an amazing array of proposals that always talk to sort of interesting ways of solving problems, new ways of solving problems. And I'll talk to just a few of the innovations that we are currently funding, but just know that this is a small sample of many innovations that the Green Trust is funding. So one example is new technologies, and indeed new ways of applying them. These are called smart nappies, made by a company called Bidikins. It's not necessarily a new thing. Reusable nappies are as old as babies are, probably. But what is new is that, in many rural areas in South Africa, and I'm sure across Africa, nappy dumping, the dumping of disposable diapers into waterways, has become a major problem. They clog up waterways, they pollute water, animals eat them, they cause health issues. They've become a major issue. And what we're trying to do is, what we're seeing in these rural areas is that people don't have choices. And people have moved so far away from the reusable nappies, the cloth nappies that we once used, that the only option available to them is these disposable diapers. So what we're trying to do is make these smart nappies, which are much more sort of sophisticated technologies than your old sort of cloth nappies, make these available to rural people living in highly biodiverse areas, and create a distribution network of young people that are going out into the communities, engaging caregivers, mothers, etc., and getting them to experiment with these nappies, which in the long run reduces the amount of waste and the pollution that's caused, and also saves people money, which is also, and youth play a very important role as these sort of distributors of these nappy systems. This is another example. This is called noncrete. It's a concrete material, and as you can see, there are pieces of wood inside this concrete, and sort of contrary to what your common sense might tell you, this is an incredibly strong, incredibly versatile material that is fire resistant, strangely, because it contains wood, and it has all sorts of amazing properties. But that wood is not just any wood. It's wood that is made from wood chips that are cut from invasive alien trees. Invasive alien trees in South Africa are a major problem. They suck up water resources. They are destroying biodiversity. And we're running a project where this material is being applied in a small community in the Western Cape, where a lot of the innovation also comes is how the community are being engaged. So they are really becoming part of the process and part of the solution. They are cutting down the trees and creating the chips. They are learning how to use this material, and with this material, we're building a creche where young people can get educated. Then there's new incentives. This is an interesting example where I'm sure in most of the countries where you live, cattle grazing is one of the major land uses. But in South Africa, as in most African countries, access to markets is really difficult. And there's a disconnect between, the quality of people's cattle and how much money they can get, because they have to travel far to get to the nearest market. They have to sell to their neighbors, and they probably don't get fair market price. And that incentivizes people to just pile more cattle onto the land. It doesn't really matter if their cattle are in bad condition, because they don't necessarily get the value of the cattle if they are in good condition. But this is a company called Meat Naturally, who we support with a number of sort of internal innovations. They provide rural mobile cattle auctions, and you can see the auction there. They bring the auctions up to the rural areas where people are farming the cattle, in these high mountain grasslands, as you can see, where people can bring their cattle, they can sell them, they can get fair market price. But it's become an incredible incentive, because what they do is they engage the local grazing associations that govern the management of these grasslands. And they say that if these grazing associations are implementing sustainable regenerative practices, then they experience certain benefits at the auction. So they pay a lower rate of commission, they get access to veterinary services, they get to sell their animals first. And that becomes a really powerful incentive for people to join these grazing associations who are being supported by other NGOs and to implement regenerative grazing practices. Then we've got new tools. These are West Coast rock lobsters, and they are, as a fishery, on the verge of collapse. And part of the problem is that the South African government system of monitoring catch is still done with pen and paper. We're at the landing sites, people are recording things, and this creates huge opportunity for fudging the numbers and essentially laundering illegal catch in with the legal catch. So we are piloting a digital system in the Western Cape that will essentially be able to sort of track and log much more accurately the amount of catch that's coming off the boats, and it's much less prone to tampering and to laundering. Then we've got financial mechanisms. We work with an organization called the Sustainable Finance Coalition, who run this process of finding, designing, and mobilizing new financial solutions that can create new sources of funding for conservation in Africa. So just in one of our projects, we are funding incubators that have looked at the blue economy and looked at biodiversity credits, where they take all of the people that are involved, they take the financial institutions, they get them in a room, they run a very exhaustive process that finds out, are these solutions viable? Can they work? Do we have buyers, and do we have funders for it, etc.? And then they mobilize them and they pilot them. And finally, new ways of organizing. I don't know if it is finally, actually. Now, I'm sure many of you have heard of agroecology. This is the idea of sort of regenerative farming practices. And I think there is a sort of silent revolution happening across Africa, where people are moving more and more towards regenerative agriculture, and more and more people are embracing it. But one of the things that I've seen is quite an innovative way of doing this in South Africa is instead of just having your farmers and they operate in a fairly dispersed manner, a lot of them are organizing around what are called hubs, which are centers for, now they can pool their resources, they can buy inputs, they can work together to sell their produce, they can work as educational centers, etc., etc. And these hubs are an innovation that I think is going to change the way that agroecology is done in Africa. Now, what role can the youth play? And Samantha, just warn me if I'm going over. I apologize if I am. Firstly, youth, I think, have new ideas, and they sometimes I don't think that youth have the confidence in their own ideas, and they need to be more confident in voicing their ideas, because I think that young people can see the world in a different way. There's often a role for youth to play in providing nuance and insight. So you might have more experienced people coming up and saying, oh, there's a possibility of this idea or whatever, but they need to talk to young people, because those young people will say, oh, no, you haven't thought about this. Oh, young people look at things in this way, and they provide really good insights into the minds of young people in their communities. Creativity, I think that, not to offend the older people, but I find that as you get older, this is someone that is probably coming to terms with his own age. As you get older, you start to get a little bit more set in your ways. And I find that young people are a bit more free thinking, and they're not bound by many of the constructs that society places on us. And I think that that's a role that youth can play. Tools and technologies, I always say that, young people are digital natives, whereas older people are digital migrants. We've only learned to go over to digital technologies more recently. And, whether it's the social media tools, AI tools, etc., young people need to be more familiar with those and bring them into the solutions that are being created in conservation. Now, the thing about innovations is they say that, yes, you've got the innovators, who are the people coming up with the ideas, but very often the most important people to bring an innovation to sort of to make an innovation successful are the first followers. And I think that this is an important role that youth can play, because they are the early adopters, the people that might see something and say, hey, this works for me, I'm going to adopt it, and I'm going to get my friends to adopt it. And that's how these things can gather momentum. energy and passion. Samantha mentioned it, young people have that energy, they have that passion, they can be advocates and activists, and they can see what's happening in their communities, and they can work towards bringing change in their communities. And I think that young people have an ability to envision a different world in a way that perhaps older people can't, because they have the optimism, they're not jaded by the world in the same way. Sorry, again, to my older the older members of the audience. But I think that they do have an ability to envision the world in a different way. And that is because of the optimism and the hope that they can bring. And I do think that this is something that they are uniquely placed to bring to the conservation space. So I'll end it there, and we can go into some discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samir. That was wonderful. It was wonderful to hear about your work, and from a different perspective to that of Paxton. Paxton brought us through the young learner within the Mount Kenya Trust and in her projects, looking at schools and education. And you brought us the perspective of the funder. So a bit more higher level, understanding, the type of projects that you've been working on and how you engage youth, especially through their innovation. And as you said, catalytic projects that can, turn a seed into a tree. And so I'd like to start with Paxton from the level of the young learner. Even though you've both shared these incredible insights, Paxton, in your view, what specific challenges or gaps in conservation make youth-led innovation, especially with your young learners, particularly important today?
I think the greatest challenge facing the young students, and especially from underserved communities and more of public schools, is lack of resources to generate ideas, lack of digital platforms or even internet connectivity. I think it mainly goes beyond giving devices and leaving the school. It goes way above trying to follow up and see what mainly the students are generating and what ideas that come from mainly giving the resources.
Thank you for that, Paxton. Resources are an important aspect, especially when it comes to underprivileged or under-resourced communities where youth have ideas, but they just don't have the capacity to bring them forth. It's interesting also that you mentioned that, Samir, especially in your last slide. Samir, can you give an example of, in the various projects that you've mentioned, is there one that's a successful youth-led conservation project or initiative that has inspired you, and why?
Yeah, sure. I think that, it's a bit difficult to say like a particular instant, because very often it's not like the projects that I work on are often being implemented and led by a whole range of different actors. But I think that youth are playing a vital role in many of these projects, and they are a lot of these ideas are not one person saying, "Hey, I've got this idea, let's implement it." It's more like these ideas are co-created by NGOs, government, young people, local communities, traditional leaders, etc. But the role that young people are playing is absolutely vital. So I'll take you to an example of up in the Eastern Cape, where you saw a few pictures of that, where they were running the cattle auctions and where they're running the smart nappy systems. I was working up in that area for 6 years, and it's an amazing place where you see the power of collaboration, and you also see the power of youth empowerment. And what's happened up there is that we've got these young people that we called eco champs or eco rangers, and these people, you see that when we find them, they often, like, they're rural youths. They've often had very limited access to education, very limited ability to participate in the formal economy. And as a result, they lack confidence in themselves. You can see it. The first time you meet them, their eyes are downcast. They're hunched. But through a sort of educational process and and actually an empowerment process. They get educated in things like environmental management and small business development and finance, etc. But in a way that is very relevant to their own environments, where they learn about the resources that they have, the cows, the water, the grass, the forests, etc., and how they can create livelihoods from that. And then they become the link between the communities and the NGOs and the and government organizations that are implementing. And so they are out there every day talking to people, understanding how, like, the lay of the land, what is important to people, and they gather that information. They apply their own interpretation and their own sort of perspective on the world, their own innovations, and that leads to all sorts of interesting innovations that, so the Smart Nappy one, the way that is being carried out is very much being informed by young people. We've had Forestry Stewardship Council certified charcoal businesses in those areas that are cutting down invasive alien trees and turning them into charcoal. We've had young people that have become water monitors that are, taking responsibility for managing natural springs that are the sole water supply for many communities, and becoming almost leaders in their own communities as a result, because people start to see, they start to earn the respect of the elders. They start to see that, oh, these young people have something to offer, and they are providing a valuable service to our community. So yeah, I think that there's amazing examples from that landscape.
Thank you, Samir, and thank you both for answering those questions. I'd like to turn the questions back to you as individuals. You're young and you're in the field of conservation. I would say fairly successful, given the bios that I read out earlier. Can you give us at least one or two points of motivation that motivated you to be where you are today, to be at the position that you are today, that would motivate other youth who look up to you? Maybe in this room, they'll look at you and say, how did he get there? What 2 points of motivation could you give to the youth who are with us today and who will watch this video a day from now, months from now, years from now? Paxton, would you like to start?
That's a tough one, because I think my source of inspiration was getting a bit of exposure to some of the communities which are facing most of the challenges. I did get a diploma in conservation and mainly largely in environmental management. But with time, I think interest really shifts into the focus and the interest at individual capacity and what you're aiming to solve, or the issues at hand, or how you really want to serve the community in underdeveloped or either ways in your capacity. Yeah.
So capacity is a big motivator.
It's a big
thank you so
motivator.
much, Paxton. Thank you. And Samir, would you like to add?
Yeah, I didn't always know that I wanted to be a conservationist. I was, I think, as many young people, I think I had many interests, and I didn't quite know what direction I wanted to go. And when I always loved nature, but I always thought of it more as almost like a hobby than a vocation. But when I started doing a few sort of elective courses in university in environmental science, I quickly realized that this is where my passion lies. This is what I love to do. And with the world in the state that it's in, if young people like me who have a passion for this, who have the energy and the will to go out and make a difference, if we don't do it, no one is going to do it. So just know that this is a calling, and it's something. If you love nature, you should be passionate about trying to save it. And if you don't do it, no one will. So that's the first thing that I would say. The second thing that I would say to motivate young people is that the environmental sector is evolving so fast, and there are so many more opportunities in that space. Whether it's for young people, rural young people living, in rural communities, or sort of graduates like yourself studying environmental science or ecology or any of those sorts of fields. You see that the proliferation of jobs, the proliferation of opportunities, the way that people are considering nature and viewing nature as not just something that needs to be protected, but something that can create opportunities, that can create livelihoods, that can create new sources of finance. I think that the conservation space is exploding, and I've seen it happen during my career. And I think that's something, if you're interested in nature, there's huge opportunity there.
Thank you. So I heard passion and I heard capacity. And I'll just throw out this question to the both of you. So what skills or mindsets do you think are essential for youth to succeed in environmental innovation? We've thrown around this word innovation. It's a big word and it can mean many things, but what essential skills or mindsets do you think are essential for the youth today to achieve this type of innovation within the conservation space, within whatever context they're in? Samir, we can start with you, and then Paxton.
Sure. I think we often talk about a growth mindset. This is this idea that, you should be open. You should always be open to new experiences, new ideas. You should never be set in your ways, because the world is changing and conservation is changing so fast that, you should always be on the lookout for opportunities. So if you see something, go for it and like try to be involved. And so throw yourself into things and make yourself useful. Don't just sit there as a young person and say, okay, I've got a job doing X. I need to like write these documents, and that's my job, and that's all I'm going to do. Push yourself, be useful, find opportunities, get yourself make sure that people notice you, and find your own story. I think that's important. I so often see CVs of young people that are very bland and dry, and they say, I did this and I had these responsibilities, but it doesn't tell the story of who you are. And nature conservation is about stories. You need to be able to tell those stories. So tell your own story, and also tell the stories of the places and the people that you're trying to that you're trying to protect, or whose lives you're trying to improve.
Thank you, Samir. And one of the ways that can be done is through social media, storytelling through Reels, storytelling through TikTok and various platforms. But I don't want to take the stage. Paxton, please go ahead.
Thank you. I think I'll second what Samir has said. But I think also conservation goes beyond passion. I think we have something that's called the theory of change. We have some who are still in denial. We have some who are accepting that this is happening. We still have some who are not really sure about the direction they really need to take. And I think getting to understand yourself in what capacity you are in, I think environment falls in every basis of everyone's career. Photography, people capture moments and tell stories. We have visual realities and video creating, which really helps with those who are not able to really interact with nature. We have programming courses and everything. People can generate projects for the underserved communities, or to solve environmental challenges in their own capacity. So I mainly think that doing the best in your capacity and giving the best and trying to find solutions in your capacity or in your career is an added plus and a way to go. Yeah.
Thank you so much. The final question before I open the floor, I've seen so many questions in the chat, very exciting. But the final question before we open the floor, if you could give one piece of advice to organizations that want to get young people more involved or engaged in conservation innovation, what would that be? One piece of advice in closing to organizations that want to engage young people. Paxton, we can start with you.
I think I'd say for organizations that are targeting the youth, first of it is be very honest with the expectations. I think we have seen a generation, and the current generation, which is more driven towards change. They are informed, they know what is to be done, they know which direction is to be taken. But I think offer them resources, offer them ideas, and as well as give them a chance to take a lead in their own capacity. Give the youths a chance to generate their own ideas. I think we have many written policies and a lot of documentation on environmental and a lot of COP meetings that took place. But the main question is, if we are discussing this on the table and not doing it on the ground, then what benefit will it yield? Yep.
Thank you. Expectations are very important so that both parties understand what they're getting into. Samir?
Yeah, I think firstly, I would say that organizations need to create space for young people. It's tempting to say, okay, we want the people that have the PhDs and the masters and the 10 years of experience and whatever, but you can get stuck in groupthink. You can miss opportunities to engage young people. So definitely create space for them, and definitely in your solutions design young people into the solutions that you're trying to create in a way that creates a feedback loop, so that you're actually getting young people to give you feedback and you're not just getting them to do things. So I would say definitely be willing to learn from them. None of us know everything, and if everyone has something to offer and something to contribute, and young people, they may not have the experience, they may not have even left their village, but they are still rich in experience. They still have contributions to make, and you still need to listen. And I would say that, I wouldn't say just be foolhardy and put trust in all young people. I think that young people also have to meet you halfway, and they have to, but when there are young people that show themselves to have potential, to have to be trustworthy, put your trust in them. I think that there's a lot of people that will just they won't take the time to invest in them and to give them the opportunities and to give them responsibilities. And I think you'll find that those people that you can trust, if you put your trust in them, they will reward you. And finally, I would say, there's this idea of design thinking. That's a very important idea in innovation. And that's this idea that you should sort of understand the problem, understand the people that are engaged in the problem. And then when you design a solution, don't design it big and go all out with this before you've tested everything and before you actually have gathered feedback on the solution. So rather start small, do things fast, and fail fast if you can, and give young people the opportunity to participate in that. Give them the resources or the opportunity to say, oh, you've got an idea, or we've got an idea, go out, try it out in your community, and don't allow them to fail. Don't criticize them too heavily, allow them to fail, and build them up like that. I think that's the advice that I would give.
Wise words from both you and Paxton. And I just want to thank you again for taking out the time to be with us today, for giving us your insights and your expertise and experiences within your presentations and answering these questions. We'll now open the floor to questions from our audience. Please feel free to raise your hand, as well as continue to type your questions in the chat. And I'll start with the virtual questions. So this one is from Danielle Crunch. My apologies if I pronounced your surname incorrectly. Where can we get resources for the climate change board game? This is for Paxton. Climate change is one of the hardest things to educate, especially in less educated communities. Board games make it better and more exciting. Paxton?
For the resources, I think collaboration and networking is a great thing. We did collaborate with an organization named the Lycipian. They have very nice interactive designed games for students. Yes, I think you can try and look for them, the Lycipian. That should really be helpful from your side. Yeah.
May you just write it in the chat,
Let
or
me do
if you
that.
have a link. Thank you so much, Paxton. We have one from Jimmy Baluku. He says, thank you, Paxton, for the presentation. His question is, how have you been catering for the special group of students with special needs, like the deaf and the blind, during the different talks and discussions to ensure that they understand conservation well?
I think in some of the schools I've interacted, we've had students who have difficulties learning, but not necessarily students living with disability. I think that's a food of thought and an area to explore and try and look for resources and ways to help people living with disabilities or students living with disabilities to ensure that they're not left behind in the drive towards sustainability. I think that's a food for thought.
Thank you so much, Paxton. Before I get to the next question in the chat, I'll give Arnold Oricho, I see your hand, a chance to ask. Arnold, please go ahead and unmute.
Thank you, team. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Paxton and Samir, for the elaborate sessions you have given us. One thing I have to mention out is conservation education is very key, and it's to influence the mentality of students just for posterity. One question I'm very concerned about is how you people monitor and evaluate your programs and how you measure the impact. Because one thing I have realized is that conservation educators, more so conservation actors, not only in Africa only, but globally, people are working in silos. So I'm very interested to know how you people are evaluating the programs and how effective are the evaluation procedures or measures. Yeah, thank you.
Samir, would you like to start and then Paxton?
Sure. Thanks, Arnold. And it's a question that I'm giving a lot of thought to at the moment, because obviously I've got 27 projects, each of them trying to do different things. You know, some of them are in marine conservation, some of them are in climate change, sustainable finance, protected area expansion, you know, anything that you can think of, we're trying to do it. And not what's more, we're all with the sort of innovation approach, it's early stage, there's a lot of unknowns, there's a lot of, you know, a lot of experimentation, so it's often quite difficult to demonstrate impact. But what I'm getting to, the point that I'm getting to is that one, you know, I think that we as conservationists sometimes believe that you know, if we go through the process, then the end will follow. But we don't necessarily put enough thought into how to measure the end, or even like how to measure that you are making progress along your the pathway that you've chosen. And you know, you can tell a nice story, you write a nice report, but you're not necessarily measuring. So I'm trying to be a lot more deliberate about how we measure things and what we measure, and trying to draw that line from the action that you're taking here to the impact that you're hoping to have, and hoping that at the end of our 3-year project that we can actually demonstrate that impact.
For me, I'd
Thank
say,
you.
yeah. For me, I'd say,
go ahead, please.
No, it's okay. For me, I'd say capacity building is very important, especially when dealing with schools and students. Capacity building for students who help other students in achieving their projects. I think one way which we try and assess our projects is for the Junior Rangers program, we have like a platform that we use, the Colibri platform, which is a free resource. It has a learner management system. That way it gives you which student is doing what. But at the end of the day, it's not really exclusive, because it gives you data of a student who is accessing what results, which resources, how long they were on the resource. But I think at the end of the day, having students generate projects after each module or after each lesson, be it water, be it forest, be it climate change, be it soil, is a great way of assessing some of the projects they are doing on site on the school. Another way of assessing it is mainly, we do have quizzes for some of the modules we are doing with the students. We have an open-ended session where students can freely give answers. That way you get to understand which students are maybe haven't really understood the modules, and the students that, of course, we have fast learning students and some are a bit slow learning. What we do is sometimes you have to go back to the same module after interacting with some of the students. I think a friend once told me the greatest challenge with conservation education is measuring the impacts. I think it's a slow, gradual process that requires a lot of patience. I think project assessment and the learner management systems at the moment are what is working for us.
Thank you so much, Paxton. And I think you've also covered Sophia Luca's question, how do you measure or assess the learner's comprehension with your last answer? I don't know if you want to add anything to that. Then Johan, I see your hand. I'll come to you. But I think you touched on it. Yes, Sophia says yes. So thank you, Paxton. You've covered that as well. So Johan, please feel free to unmute.
Thanks, Samantha, and thanks for your energy. It's good to see that qualifications and experience from outside conservation leads to careers in conservation, but it's also interesting to see sometimes how people with qualifications in conservation leads to careers still in conservation, but in unexpected ways. So my question is actually to another audience member. And I would like to ask Danielle Cronje to just give us a 3-minute explanation of what she does and where she works, because she's a brilliant example of somebody who studied conservation and she didn't become a game ranger, but something else very meaningful. Danielle, if you are there, it'd be great if you can talk to us.
Goodness, now I'm being put on the spot. Hi. Hi, everybody. My name is Danielle Cronje. I am the director, sorry for the dog, the director of the Mossel River Conservation Team. So that's one of the hats that I wear. And then I studied conservation ecology, but then I started to work for a developer, a Newtown developer. So I am the company's environmental officer. So that's why I say the field is so interesting, because, I mean, as a conservationist, obviously we are told that developers are bad and that, you know, they are the big bad guys. But in my job, I've really learned how collaboration can just, how can I say, make sustainability better for the people that have to make profit, but also for the community. So with my work in Versantekraal, that's where we're located. It's just outside Durbanville in the Western Cape. We do rehabilitate the Mosselbank River and the wetlands. But the biggest job is environmental education. So I don't work with schools, because there's a lot of children that don't go to school that need to be educated about the environment, about their local wetlands, like climate change as well, which is one of my biggest topics that I always find hard to educate on, because climate change is such a far-away concept. We do environmental cleanups. We've diverted about 10 tons of waste from just our section of our river. And so we take every opportunity that we get to engage with the children to educate. So if it's World Wetlands Day, we'll do the focus on World Wetlands Day. If it's Arbor Day, we'll focus on trees, and we'll link how important kids are with, you know, they will compare how you are like a tree. And so I found this very interesting, and I'm definitely going to go follow that link for the game with the kids. And yeah, engaging with youth is incredibly difficult sometimes, because we have to deal with a lot of gangs in our area, and then you have to make the environment so much more interesting for them to partake in our programs. But yes, we are up for the challenge, and I'm so inspired. And yeah, thank you for putting me on the spot.
Well, thank you for being up to the challenge. That was brilliant. Thank you. It was also nice to hear about your project, Daniela. So I don't see any more questions in the chat, except Sophia asked you, Paxton, if you could just share the tools you use. Maybe you can share them in the chat, the tools you use for assessing learners, because she's also an environmental educator like yourself. So perhaps you can just maybe share the type of tools that you use. Do we have any more questions? Feel free to raise your hand. You can also put on your camera so we can see your beautiful faces while you ask the question. Do we have any more questions? We have Andy Klee, idea rather than a question. Oh, okay. No, please go ahead. You can feel free to speak, Andy. You can unmute.
Hi, thanks very much. I was distracted by the tech. What was my question? Yes, sorry, leadership where? I think I love the presentations. It's real. I've got all excited, which is why I can't speak properly as I do. But there's a sort of leadership who, but leadership where? And I think part of the answer starts with that. How do you want to serve your community comment from Paxton? But it's not just leadership in a big scale. I mean, the examples we often get touted as leadership are, you know, the leader of a country, the leader of a big company. But can leadership at different scales be useful? And how do we tease that out and develop and empower people to share ideas and all that sort of stuff? Do you kind of get where I'm coming from? Cool, thank you. I'll shut up now.
Thank you for that question, because leadership is a very important question, especially when youth involvement or engagement is concerned, because leadership determines access. It also determines access to resources, finances, etc. And we have, within the political space, we have an aging African leadership. And so there is space for youth innovation, even in conservation within these spaces. So I'm curious to hear what our speakers think. Samir, do you want to maybe share your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that leadership is absolutely critical, but leadership comes in various forms. You know, in the places where we work, you don't just find, you know, like we've got all sorts of different leadership structures. We've got the sort of government leadership structures. We've got traditional leadership structures where, you know, that sort of relate to the governance of the land and the natural resources, which are often very different and often more influential than the government leadership structures. And then you've got all sorts of informal leadership structures. And I think that one of the things that we try to do is create multi-stakeholder partnerships that bring all of our different stakeholders together. So it brings government, it brings academia, it brings NGOs, the private sector, traditional leaders, youth, etc. And within those structures, so it creates a platform where everyone gets a voice and gets a chance to sort of raise their concerns or their ideas. And what we found is that that's an amazing sort of it creates very fertile soil for innovation, but it also creates fertile soil for leadership, where you'll see a young person will come through and they'll be able to raise their voice, and they'll be given the confidence to take responsibility for a particular project or a particular idea, and that'll give them it's almost like a sort of leadership structure within a leadership structure, you know, like the smaller groups, and that it's amazing to see how when those people are given that opportunity, that they rise up to the opportunity, and how it then gives them the confidence to take their careers even further.
Absolutely. Paxton, do you want to add to that?
I think leadership is quite a broad perspective. I think I used to be very shy, like work behind the scenes and everything, but it took a lot of capacity building and the team throwing me at some of the challenges to handle. So I feel like empowerment and capacity building, creating a platform platforms for the youths to be involved is a way to go. We have youth hubs, which are outside working environments. We have resource centers, which youths can access wherever they have a minute or have any challenge. I think leadership is, some say some are born with it, and some say leadership has to be earned somehow or learn about it. But I feel like mentorship and capacity building of individuals and trying to push forward for other people to do or take a step in what they believe is a way to go. We have a lot of people with great ideas, but are scared of coming forward. Maybe because they're scared of failing, or maybe someone is scared about being judged or trying and failing at the same time, or maybe someone is scared that they invest into an idea which other people don't really support. So I feel like support is a main issue in trying and to build ambassadors for conservation. Yeah.
Absolutely. I love the answers that you both gave. And I'd just like to add to that and say trust as well. Samir, you mentioned this in your presentation, that those in power or in leadership positions who are most oftentimes older need to trust that the youth can do what they've instructed them or they've given them the responsibility to do. With giving the youth trust, it opens up a lot of avenues for them to feel confident, for them to feel capable. And like you said, Paxton, then they'll be able not to be afraid to fail, because the fear of failure, I think, stops a lot of people, even adults or the older generation. And so I think in terms of leadership as well, it's important to recognize that youth have capacities that, that aren't necessarily easy, that are not necessarily computable or put on paper. So it might not appear in their CV that they're capable of doing A, B, C, and D. But if you give them the chance through trusting them, I think it opens a world of exposure and experience for them and for the people who are giving them that platform. And I just want to read the comments in the chat quickly before we close. I think some of them are quite interesting. Andy Klee, you also mentioned, you're the one who wrote this. I'd rather than a question, could the nappy project be expanded to include reusable menstrual products? This is to you, Samir. I understand that the lack of availability of these items can be a significant barrier to young women accessing education and much more. And Liesel Van As also said what about adult nappies? Do you want to quickly respond to that before we close?
Yeah, I'm just busy writing a response, but in short, we did consider that, including menstrual products, but we ultimately decided that we needed to focus the project because we had a limited budget, and the nappies were by far and away the greater environmental problem. But what we're trying to do is really create, it's less about the nappies and more about a distribution system that gives rural people choices. So right now, rural people don't have choice. And that means that they don't have services, they don't have waste removal services, and they don't have choice of what nappies to use. And therefore, they don't really have an option but to pollute the environment. So we're hoping that by creating a distribution system for these smart nappies initially, that distribution system can then be used for various other products, including, sanitation pads or various other products. So that's where we hope to go with that. That's the catalytic element of it, that it goes beyond just nappies into a whole range of other environmentally friendly products.
Thank you, Samir. Paxton, do you want to add?
Yeah, I think I'm going to just derive a bit from conservation, but not really a bit. I think one of the projects we had to implement in the southern area of Mount Kenya region was the reusable sanitary towels. This was mainly because we blame it on COVID, of course. After that period and a long phase of students being out of schools, we had a very high number of teenage pregnancies into the county. And some of the challenges are facing some of the lower side of the mountain is some of the students are being raised by their grandparents mostly because the parents aren't within. And we have issues of sexual exploitation just to get sanitary towels from some of the Boda guys or some of the people in their lives. So implementing of sanitary towels is, initially we wanted to buy the sanitary towels, but I think the question comes back into how sustainable is buying sanitary towels for a kid each year. And I think if Samir will be able to implement into a reusable sanitary towels, then maybe. Because a pack of 6 will take our students almost 2 years. If you were to calculate the cost of buying sanitary towels to reusable sanitary towels, then I think the sustainability part of it will be a bit questionable, yeah.
Thank you for your insights and for sharing that, Paxton. Cheryl Ogilvie says, well done. Storytelling, dramas, hands-on activities, games are a trick of the trade. Carry on with the great work. Let's share. And we have one more question for Samir, and that will be the final question that we will take tonight. It says, you spoke of using invasive tree species for your composite material wood chips for construction. Do you have any projects that you use that use indigenous plant species instead of invasive ones?
So I believe that the product, which is called Noncrete, you can look it up. It's Noncrete, can integrate various forms of wood chips or various species of wood. Just in South Africa, we focus on the invasive alien trees because, firstly, we don't have a lot of indigenous forest species. So we have a lot invasive alien trees are just such a massive problem. And if we can create a market incentive that can start to incentivize people to clear invasive alien trees and restore native vegetation, then that is it's a win-win-win situation. So that's why we've tended to focus on invasive alien trees in South Africa. But I'm not sure whether the Noncrete guys are have experimented with other species in other countries. But I think they'd be, if you found their contact details on their website, I'm sure they would be happy if you reached out to them.
Thank you, Samir. Isaac Frost, I hope that answers your question. And one more comment that I would like to read here. It says, this is Arnold Orichi, who asked the question earlier. Very excited to interact with you all. I gear an initiative to consolidate and bridge partnership gaps between conservation educators and actors in Kenya. This initiative aims to bring conservation educators together to promote partnerships, just to mention a few. And a lot of people in the chat have been writing their email addresses and who they are. So feel free to run through the chat quickly and connect. This is part of our community and our network, and it's a great way to connect with other people. So in the absence of any questions, I just want to say again, a big thank you to Samir, a big thank you to Paxton. You guys have been incredible. Your experiences, your talk, the way you answered the questions, was truly inspiring. I'm sure you inspired all of us in this room. And I just wanted to, on behalf of the Youth Advisory Council, thank you once again for being a part of our Unlocking Nature series. CL, thank you so much for helping us organize this and organize our speakers, and everyone else who's in the room. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we go, just wanted to remind you of our talk on the 6th of Feb, Bats in Focus, African Bat Conservation with Dr. Kieran O'Malley, Louisa Oleta, and other experts. So it's going to be a panel discussion. And on the 20th of February, the Anthropocene and African Conservation, Creating a Future Footprint. These are exciting talks that are up and coming. Please stay tuned on your emails so that you register and you join us on these talks. And feel free to go through the chat so that you can also connect with Paxton and Samir, who've also put in their email addresses. Again, this is a space for networking, and we look forward to hearing from you from the LCA and to seeing you in future talks. This isn't the last of the Youth Advisory Council. We'll definitely host again, and we'll bring you more innovative, more powerful speakers. So stay tuned, and thank you so much for joining us.